So here's some really cool things that we can do with the bell curve or with the frequency distribution. And again, remember, the more that we sample a population, the more that we sample or measure people from a population, the more that frequency distribution is going to look like the bell curve, where most people are going to score somewhere in the middle. And the further away we get from the middle, either the higher or the lower, the fewer people are going to score kind of toward the edges. So there's 3 numbers that you have to memorize, and only 3 numbers, in order to make this bell curve useful and transform it from a shape to the most beautiful, useful picture in the world. And those 3 numbers are this: 34, 14, and 2. 34, 14, and 2. And remember, on the vertical here, right, that's how many. So as we go up, this represents a lot of people got this particular score. So you'll see here what we're going to do to use 34, 14, and 2 is we're going to actually take our bell curve and we're going to draw a line right down the middle. That represents the midpoint. Many of you are used to this and used to hearing it called the 50th percentile. I'll explain how we get that in a minute. But for our purposes, this is a score here, a standard score right now of 0. That means that if you are right in the middle, you are 0 standard deviations away from the middle. Say it again. If you're right in the middle, you're no standard deviations away from the middle. So this is the standard deviation location. For some of you who have had stats, you may have heard this by another term called the z-score. That's harder to figure out what the heck that means. But 0 standard deviations away from the middle, if you're at the middle. Then we're going to draw another line going up 1 step this way. And a step, otherwise referred to as a standard deviation, we'd go up by 1. So if you have a score here, which is higher than the middle, right at this exact point, you have a z-score of 1, or you are 1 standard deviation away from the middle. We can also go in the other direction. So we're going to go down. And so if we go down the same distance from the middle as we went up, that's going down 1 standard deviation, or 1 z-score. So we can have a z-score of -1. You guessed it, we can always keep going. So let's go a little bit further this way. And you'll see that we can go -2 standard deviations from the middle. If you're getting lost, just go back to the middle and count the lines. That's all we need to worry about, is counting the lines. We can also go up this way, another standard deviation. And again, if you remember what our definition of normal is anyone underneath the curve. Here's the beauty of the bell curve. We can go out to infinity this way, and we can go out to infinity this way. And if we sample enough people from the population, we're going to have a chance of getting someone who's way that way or way that way. And they're underneath the curve as well. For our purposes, most of the work we're going to do is going to fit between 2 to the left or 2 to the right standard deviations of the mean, or the middle, or the spot where most people score. So again, let's go back to our 3 magic numbers. And I'm assuming that the numbers 0, 1, and 2 don't need to be magic numbers. We can all memorize those. So these 3 magic numbers, 34, 14, 2. Chant those with me. 34, 14, 2. 34, 14, 2. Hopefully someone's listening to you talking to the computer. It's awesome. All right, the first magic number, 34. It actually goes right here. And that means that, here's some magic now. When we sample enough people and we get a normal distribution, 34% of all the people sampled will always score between 0 and 1 standard deviations from the mean. 34% of all people in a normal distribution will always score between 0 and 1 standard deviations from the mean. If you're getting ahead of me, I bet you can guess what goes over here. Yep. 34. 34% of all people sampled will always fall between 0 and -1 standard deviations from the mean. So you can see when we add these two together, that roughly 68% of people sampled will always be pretty darn close to the middle in Minnesota terms. Now let's move out another ring. So let's go down this way. What percentage of people would you say fall between -1 and -2 standard deviations? Visually, you can see that this slice of the bell curve is smaller than that slice. Well, you know, because right, the second magic number. 14% of all people always fall between -1 and -2 standard deviations. So out of 100 people, 14 of them are going to be down here. Out of 100 people, 34 are here. Out of 100 people, another 34 are there. Now you're starting to see a pattern, I bet. What percentage of people go right here? You got it, 14%. So 14% of people fall between 1 and 2 standard deviations above the mean. So that's getting to be pretty high or far to the right. Now you'll see that this makes up 96% of all people. So 96, roughly, 96% of all people will have a score between -2 and 2 standard deviations from the mean. Last number we need to memorize, 2. 34, 14, 2. 34, 14, yep, you got it, 2. 2% of all people will have a standard score, a z-score, of less than 2 standard deviations away from the mean. So 2% of people will have a score down that way, from right there. 2% of people will have a score from here or above. So if you have a standard score above the second standard deviation, you are in the top 2%. Said another way, to obtain a score that's 2 standard deviations away from the mean, out of 100 people, you're one of the 2 people that got that score. Last bit here, and then we'll take a break. So again, we remember these are the percentages of people, the percentage of people sampled that fall between a given range. So if we know that 2% of people fall between way down there and -2 standard deviations, and we add that to 14, we get 16% of people. 16% of people are 1 standard deviation or lower. 16 plus 34. You got it. That's the 50th percentile. 50th percentile standing. 2 plus 14 puts us at the 16th percentile. And this is 2nd percentile. So now, at the 50th percentile, which is probably what you're used to seeing, and what the scores are on the ADW profile presented as percentile standing, we can see if we're right down the middle, we have a percentile standing of the 50th percentile. What percentage of people are between 0 and 1 standard deviations from the middle? You got it, 34%. So we know if we add 50 to 34, we're at the 84th percentile. The 84th percentile. That is to say, we're in the top 16%. We can figure that out by taking 100 minus 84, or we can figure that out by 14 and 2 equals 16. So you got it. To be 2 standard deviations above the mean puts you in the 98th percentile. And if you're above the 98th percentile, you're 2 standard deviations above the mean or more.